In the second episode, dedicated to the Cote du Rhone, we explore the sustainability program and the researches that are taking place thanks to the Intern Rhone. The Intern Rhone has three main missions: economic support, promotion of the appellation, and technical support. The latter is embodied by the Institut Rhodanien, where all the researches and development is being carried. Wine sustainability refers to a range of vineyard and wine production practices that are not only ecological but also economically viable and socially responsible. About this topic we speak with our guest Julie Coutton, the PR manager for Intern Rhone. Every vineyard site is different, and to get the best result in the bottle, producers make decisions to best make their wine given the soil, climate and the surrounding. Important topic has been covered is water, stress and drought. We cover much more with Julie about the grape varieties. The researches to Rhodanien is taking place at the moment. If you found this episode valuable, please remember to subscribe and to leave a review. Now, on with the show. Hi, I'm Mattias Carpazza, and this is the Looking Into Wine podcast. Wine and winemaking can be complex, but this podcast has a simple mission. We want to give you the skills and tools to harness your passion about wine. Through this series, we will shine a spotlight on some of the different regions, process, and concepts that shape the fascinating world of wine. I hope you enjoy the show and your own journey looking into wine. Welcome to the Looking Into Wine podcast. I'm Mattias Carpazza, your host, and today we are talking about the sustainability program of the Cote du Rhone Valley, the researches and initiative that Intern Rhone with the Institut Rhodanien is currently working on. The southern Rhone region is a much warmer and drier region than the northern Rhone is facing many challenges, and the Intern Rhone is looking to future-proof the wines and the diversity of the region. I welcome to the show my guest, who is the export media and relationship manager for Intern Rhone, Julie Coutton.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, you're welcome. Thank you for joining me on the show, and it's great to be here with you today here in London. It's fantastic, and so tell me just what do you do for Intern Rhone and what's for the Cote du Rhone? What is your roles?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Very happy to meet you. I've been working with Intern Rhone for the past 2.5 years. I'm a PR manager, so I deal mostly with the media, and I'm very lucky to be accompanying some writers when they're in the Rhone Valley to go and visit some estates. And I'm in charge of export markets, so the UK and Asian markets. And I also have a bit of a technical side because I am a diploma graduate of the WSET, and I'm a stage 2 Master of Wine student. So I got a little bit of a geeky side and a geeky interest in this.
Which is fantastic. We'll do like having the geeky conversation on the podcast. I think we're going to touch upon some interesting topics during the recording. So we're focusing today on the Cote du Rhone, and I mean, when I'm thinking about the Cote du Rhone and when I'm thinking about this year, especially, how was with this like extraordinary drought, vintage, and very dry year? How was for the Cote du Rhone? How that impacted this year for the wines and everything?
2022 has been a very interesting vintage. It's been a bit early for the white and the rosé. The thing was, it was a very dry vintage. So it was dry in spring, and we had a very dry summer as well, with high temperatures and a few heat waves up until mid-August, when it started raining. So the grapes for the white and rosé wines have been harvested early, sometimes as early as the 10th of August in some parts of the Rhone Valley vineyards. But for the most of Cote du Rhone, we have been able to wait a little bit more. And the fact that it rained from mid-August and into September, it allowed us to have some later harvest for the rest. So the harvest took place over a very long time, and most reds were harvested in September. Now, thankfully, all the grapes are inside. They're all in the cellar. And it's looking very promising. One thing we noticed this year was the incredible drought resistance of the vines of Grenache, of Syrah, and all the other varieties that we grow. Because despite the heat waves, despite the drought, they didn't stop the ripening process. So the vines kept working and doing the photosynthesis, and the grapes kept ripening, and we arrived at very beautiful maturity levels. I haven't been able to taste. I've tasted, I think, one must until now. But all the winemakers and the growers are saying that in terms of quality, it's going to be a lovely vintage.
Oh, fantastic. It's very good to hear that. But I mean, for me, when I'm thinking about the region, I know the Institute is doing a lot of research on water and water stress and water levels. So what have you seen in these years of research, and how first of all, how does it work for the researching team? What is it looking for?
So one thing to remember is that in terms of irrigation, AOC rules say that we're not allowed to irrigate unless we have an exception that can be granted for vintage through vintage. Mm-hmm. So it's not systematic. So one of the roles of Institut Rhodanien is to help in this process and to monitor the water stress levels, figure out when it's appropriate and give recommendations. Because it's not just the question of irrigating or not, it's also what are the best methods, the best tools to use so that we can do that cleverly. Yeah. Not wasting precious water, or how to decide when to irrigate, how much, in order to increase the efficiency and minimize the potential loss and waste of water. The Institut Rhodanien has developed a network of plots in order to measure water stress across the whole Cote du Rhone vineyards. So they're following the parcels and saying every week, okay, here's where we are, and they're encouraging all the growers to participate. So the method to do that is following the shoot tip of the vine, and to say where the shoot tip is positioned compared to the top two leaves. So if the tip is up above the leaves, that means there's no measurable water stress. Okay. If it's at the same level, there's a little bit of stress. And if the two leaves are above the tip, then it's an early sign of water stress, because it has to be detected before the plant shuts down and stops photosynthesis. And that's one of the tools to do this, along with measuring the tension of the vine, but which is a bit more costly and more complex. Yeah. So that's one thing that can be done quite easily when just walking the vineyards. So there's the whole network, and hoping that all the growers will contribute as well.
So basically the Cote du Rhone is looking to work closely with the producers, and I think you establish 4 commitments for the program for sustainability. What are they, and how are you initiating them with the producers?
You're right. It's all about the dynamic of the collective, thinking that the growers and winemakers of Cote du Rhone and of the Rhone Valley vineyards are a community. And in 2021, we initiated something called the 4 Pledges of the Cote du Rhone. And one might think that, we decided on some commitments and say, what are they going to be? And then decide, what do we do in order to correspond to the commitments? But the thing is, it was done backwards. It was done based on research of what the growers and winemakers are already doing and already implementing. What are the successful sustainability strategies? And then, how can we group them to reflect what they are already doing and help build up this? Yeah. So there are 4 pledges that have been identified. The first one is ensuring the transparency of practices. So focusing on AOC regulations, about the law, about sustainability and CSR approaches. The second one is protecting biodiversity, both in terms of flora and fauna, which is a very, very strong focus that we've been working on. The third one is respecting the terroirs and preserving the resources. So everything related to labels as well. Okay. And the fourth one is passing on a legacy. So again, focusing back on the community and how do we do to preserve these practices and preserve the heritage, because the vineyard is roughly 2,000 years old. Yeah. And it's an ongoing history with every new generation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's something to future-proof the region, because, I mean, I guess that it's going as much as other region, but it's going through a lot of different new challenges and a lot of new stressors than they can put into stress. Just probably change the style which you don't want to do. So I know then there has been some works done on like rootstocks and grape varieties. They just introduced a couple of new varieties that are being planted, which I'm going to I spoke with Matt about them. But I know then you're doing research on new crosses and what are they and what you're looking at the moment on that side.
So the 4 new varieties that we are experimenting on, we have started this 2 years ago, and it's an ongoing project that's going to happen over the next 10 years. So we're working on some common or ancient varieties. There's Carignan Blanc, which is very promising. It's drought resistant. There's Rôle, which some people know as Vermentino, but we have to use the word Rôle. And there are 2 hybrids called Vidocq and Floréal. Okay. So Floréal is a white variety, and we're working on them in order to establish how suitable they are, how appropriate they are at a generic level within the region to see in the vineyards and then in the wines what kind of wines do they make. So one of the assets of Cote du Rhone is blending. Yeah. So they're going to be obviously limited. So for now, it's an experimental phase. They're not yet officially approved, but some growers can implement them and start blending them into their wines. And we're also researching some new varieties. So in particular, we're focusing on crossings between Grenache and Syrah. Since 2019, if I remember correctly, we have created around 200 new varieties, new crossings between these 2. Oh. And we're observing and monitoring over several years. So first to see when do they ripen, if they're early, late, what's their yield, what's their taste potential, how do they react to water stress, obviously. And now we're working with just 5 individuals of each of the 200, so 5 vines. And on the next stage, it's going to be experimenting on the larger scale, but eliminating a few of them, but working with a larger number of vines and checking for disease resistance, which is also a main concern. So with mildew, oidium, grapevine diseases, and that's going to take us. It's a long process. Yeah. We're estimating it's going to take another 10 to 12 years, so maybe around 2035 to see these new varieties.
What are the producer? What are you suggesting to the producer to implement in their vineyard while you do this research? Is there anything you're looking at in the vineyard in terms of like cover crops, or is anything then you've seen and then it could help mitigate these heat waves or the droughtness?
Right now, most of the work is on biodiversity and as well grass cover, because we can see that in some cases grass cover can improve the storage capacity, it can cool down the soil, but there's always the question of being careful with the competition. And Cote du Rhone is such a diverse region that it's not one size fits all. Yeah. It has to be really tailored and understanding every vineyard, every plot, because we cannot just recommend one solution. But there's a work on that. And in terms of encouraging biodiversity, so in some parts agroforestry, there are some experiments on that, on planting olive trees and hedges. The Syndicat has a partnership, it's called an observatory of agricultural biodiversity, and it's one of the largest networks for agricultural biodiversity in France. There are more than 220 ongoing experiments of protocols of checking for biodiversity. So that's counting butterflies, for example, and bats and invertebrates, and just checking for the health of the soil, health of a vineyard, and also pest management.
Because I guess in the last few years, a lot of producers also start looking at organic production and biodynamic. Have you seen any growth in that usage throughout the last decade, or is there the producer taking on the use of organic?
There has been a noticeable increase. Roughly now about 13% of the vineyard is certified. That being said, it's not the only way of being sustainable, because a lot of them will have maybe not organic, but rezone or sustainable or eco-friendly practices, while not always being certified. And on the other side, you also see some wineries that are, some of them who don't have vineyards, but are being sustainably certified and doing some different approaches, like using solar panels and checking the water usage at the winery level and reducing their waste, reducing the plastic use.
Yeah, and what about the research on on the rootstock or the because I guess there is a lot of other elements that can be done to help the. I think the main research at the moment is to try to understand the weather pattern and how hot it's becoming and how to mitigate that. What other research are you looking at to do that and help the producer to make good choices?
The Institut Rhodanien is pushing for recommendations on how to choose the right rootstock. So there's one thing critical about rootstock is that when you plant one, it's for the next 30 years. Yeah. So it has to be a really critical choice. But the first step is always the iron and chlorosis risk, because it can be so damageable to the vineyard that's the first filter in order to eliminate some options. And then comes disease resistance and water resistance, drought resistance. So some of the rootstocks that are quite suitable that we've identified would be 110 Richter, which is quite good in terms of dry conditions. But then most of the work that we are doing on rootstock is based on partnerships with other structures like the IFV. And there's the one working really on that topic. And our work at Institut Rhodanien would be more about recommending itineraries.
And when was the Institut Rhodanien founded, and what is the story with when it was started and how is it evolving throughout the years?
So it's already been there quite a long time, and since the past 2 years, it has been restructured in order to really help the growers and the winemakers face the upcoming challenges. So there are new projects being researched. Another area of work is accompanying the global strategy of Intern Rhone at an interprofession. So that would be in the working on diversification. We are seeing an increase in interest for the whites and rosé of the Rhone Valley, and including Cote du Rhone. So one of the areas of research is also how to maintain the balance and how to work on these styles of wines and how to accompany the growers and winemakers who want to make more white and more rosé.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely, I think the rosé and the white wines are having a very interesting with Rhône. It's been very successful in the southern France and then Cote du Rhone. I've tasted some really interesting whites from the region. And how does compare to how different it would be from like a Cote du Rhone and a Cote du Rhone village? What do you have to look at there? Is anything you need to do differently for a Cote du Rhone village, or is it bit more easier to work maybe in a Cote du Rhone because they know the regulation are a bit different, or they having less problem in a Cote du Rhone village because they're more suitable vineyard?
It's mostly a question of having identified the specific terroirs and specific vineyards. So the difference is primarily a question of geography. And some vineyards, some villages having been identified as Cote du Rhone village, or in some case named villages, so with the 22 villages with a name. And then there's a further restriction that the Cote du Rhone village appellation has a minimum 40% of Grenache for the reds.
And how is Grenache responding in the last few years? So I guess it's quite drought resistant. So is any research you've been doing specifically for Grenache, or any worries about Grenache? Because definitely is the heartbeat of the Cote du Rhone.
Grenache is actually one of our main assets. If we go back to drought, we've been studying how it behaves, and Grenache is more structurally adapted to dry conditions. If you think about Grenache versus Syrah, for example, so Syrah has an adaptation, but in the time when it's dry, so it's a variety that can still focus on ripening its grapes. Focus, if I may say so, despite of the water stress. So it keeps photosynthesis, even if there's a little bit of defoliation. So Syrah is really good in the proper time. But then Grenache is more adapted in the long run in maintaining the survival of the plant. So we have some amazing old Grenache vines, some 100-year-old Grenache that are absolutely beautiful. And the thing is, it has adapted because it self-regulates its leaf surface, so that there are less leaves in the shade. And the thing is, the leaves that are in the shade, they still do the transpirations, you see, the evaporation, but they're not that active with photosynthesis. So Grenache protects itself that way.
So I really like Grenache. I think it's one of my favorite grape varieties. I'm really happy to hear that he's not thriving, but is able to cope with this heat and the other problem that happen. What sort of other aspect of the sustainability are you looking at aside of the climate change or the climate control? What other aspect of for the help of the communities, or what other side of the sustainability program are you looking at?
Well, one of the big news of this year is that Intern Rhone has a sustainability label. So we're now not certified, but labelized as a CSR, so corporate social responsibility labeled association. And the work is about the community and fostering sustainable practices at all levels. So it's also about the careful use of the resources, about encouraging global promotion and synergies with all actors. In terms of waste management, there has been incredible initiatives from companies in the Cote du Rhone for wineries. There's been some new buildings that are completely
subterranean.
Not subterranean, but they have installed solar panels, so they can be self-sufficient, and they're working on isolation in order to not be too hot in summer and not too cold in winter, and in order not to use too much energy, which we're talking a lot these days. There's also some, like one of the cooperative in the eastern part of the Cote du Rhone has implemented a program to reduce the weight of its glass bottles, and it's led to a reduction of 150 tons of glass per year. So that's really efficient in terms of the carbon footprint of their wines.
Especially now, then glass shortages seem to be a big problem for the wine industry. There's a lack of actual bottles to use for many regions. So that, and also efficiency in energy consumption. It has to be one of the main thoughts for any wineries or any wine region. But I guess also that for me, when I think about Cote du Rhone, when I think like the eastern Cote du Rhone, how it's changing. There's like from producing to being on the region, the part of the Cote du Rhone that produce the vast majority is focusing more on like quality production. How you seen in the development of Cote du Rhone, just not only in the sustainability, but like how is evolving for you the Cote du Rhone, the image of Cote du Rhone?
There's a really funny thing that I absolutely love with Cote du Rhone is it's almost like it has one image for everyone. Yeah. A lot of it is still like very affordable, and the thing is, it's always been so reliable in terms of quality that Cote du Rhone can be, well, all moderation considered an everyday wine. It's a wine that always delivers in terms of quality, in terms of pleasure, whatever the price you put in. There's a premiumization as well, with some wines that are for aging, with some wines using oak and more complex. So, and at all levels, at Cote du Rhone Village, and Cote du Rhone Village with a name, in each part. And it's always been a modern and very adaptable appellation. And I think everyone has maybe not even one image, but maybe even images of the Cote du Rhone. It's so diverse in its styles, and with 23 grape varieties, there's just so much that we can do with both sides of the Rhone River. Yeah,
I'm thinking of some of the villages on the hillside, like high altitude, and then you have some of the villages lower altitude, complete different style. I think it's a very dynamic wine region. It can really produce many different styles, and sometimes I wish there would be more coverage of these different sides of the Cote du Rhone, because I really still think it's offer great values, and you can find incredibly high quality wines for good price. And I think that's one of the main aspects of the Cote du Rhone. But I think in moving forward, maybe it's with this like premiumization or the look of making higher quality wines all throughout the region, I think it can really strive. And how do you see the region improving? Is there any silver lining? And you've seen in the warming climate, I know there's no silver lining, but if you could...
I would say that the silver lining is that we have so many assets that we can work with. There's diversity of terroirs, diversity of climates, because some vineyards are more higher altitude than others. Some are more windy, some are more sheltered. There's the plurality of the varieties that we get to work with. We haven't touched upon it yet, but Carignan and Cinsault, they adapt amazingly well to changing climatic conditions. There are many endemic species, wonderful biodiversity. But I would say that the main asset today is the community of the growers and winemakers in Cote du Rhone. They all pushing forward, preserving this legacy, this history, and this. Sorry, I don't know the word. This patrimoine.
The heritage of the heritage.
Preserving the heritage. The region is 2,000 years old, and we've been adapting and evolving for these past 2,000 years. We're going to still be there, and there's still so much promise ahead, and so many wonderful developments.
I just, while you were talking there about the Cinsault, the grape varieties, I just wanted to maybe ask your last question, because what grape varieties are you seeing and then the producer getting more behind? I love Cinsault, and I think Carignan as well is really interesting. I really like those grape varieties, but that's a personal choice. What do you see is of the existing grape varieties? Which one are the people or the producer are more focusing on?
Well, Carignan and Cinsault are gaining some traction, some interest, but Grenache is still very much the big love of the region, and Syrah always brings so much. I would think that one of the interests today is on the white varieties. Bourboulogne, for example, has been a bit forgotten sometimes. Well, the fact that we're working with blends means that they're not on the front label.
Yeah.
But Bourboulin brings some lovely acidity and freshness and a bit of zest to the wines. And Clairette is truly magnificent.
Okay.
There are some old Clairette vines somewhere in the region, and it has this structure, this texture, and very lovely bitterness sometimes in the finish that can bring amazing balance.
Okay.
We're experimenting with Rôle and Floréal and Carignan Blanc, which could be promising in the future. But there's also the northern varieties, Marsanne and Roussanne, that are very interesting in the blends.
Yeah, I think I was reading somewhere that there's an argument about bringing back some more of the blending process, and not in a region like Cote du Rhone, because obviously it's specialized in the blending, but like to help with like mitigate another region where they specialize in one grape varieties. There's an argument that then blending it can really help bringing up some acidity or soften the tannin. I think the work there in the Cote du Rhone can really set an example of how blending can really help in that sort of sense, and it can help other region if they need it, or other producers are looking for moving from the specific grape varieties to a blend, because I think moving forward there might be a need of some blending throughout the regions. But anyway, I just wanted to ask if you wanted to add anything else on the program that you're doing and we haven't touched upon, and just to closing, or what if not, because we did cover quite a bit, and there is a lot. I know that I'm going to put in the comment on the show notes or the link to the research that you've been doing, so people can go and read. And I think in half an hour we can't really cover everything, but yeah, if you wanted to say anything.
I would say two things, because we have covered so many topics on sustainability, on the commitments, the pledges of Cote du Rhone, but then it all touches back to two main things. One of them is, if you get the chance, it's about visiting the region and meeting the persons who are behind that, and who, because I'm talking about it, but there are thousands of people living it and working towards this every day. Yeah. And if you can't, well, the proof is in the drinking, I would say, because all this diversity of Cote du Rhone is just there waiting to be tasted. And like we said, it's always so reliable and so pleasurable and so diverse in styles. Let's just keep enjoying Cote du Rhone.
Perfect. I mean, I really love this community sense that is coming forward, or from the reading I've done and the project I've seen throughout the region. I can see this movement trying to move all together. And I think it's great and they could set an example for many other regions, because I see a lot of other regions not working so well all together. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting project of what you're doing, and I am going to speak with Matt about the history of the region and the other sides of the region where he sees the future and what he's seeing in the region. But yeah, thank you so much for this half an hour together. It's been really interesting, touching upon many different subjects, and as I said, that there's going to be a link on the show notes for more research, more reading for the Institut Rhodanien and Intern Rhone as well. But thank you, Julie, for this half an hour.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
You're welcome. Thank you. You listen to Julie Coutton of the Institut Rhodanien on the sustainability program of the Cotes du Rhone. If you enjoyed the podcast, remember to hit the subscribe button and to tell your friends about the podcast. Be sure to go to mattiascarpazza.com and to subscribe to the mailing list. You can find Looking Into Wine on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, and every major listening app. If you're enjoying the podcast, you can donate on mattiascarpazza.com.